This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the Antoine Dupont of website builders. And as Toulouse went to town announcing our favourite Boxy Boy's new 6-year contract this weekend, you may have missed this website. Because it was put together by me, not Toulouse. With Squarespace's wide range of online features, it took me minutes for me to personally assemble this website in honour of our glorious, glorious Square boy, able to add pages and blogs covering all my favourite Antoine moments, or videos, or add features, or speculate using all sorts on what he may get up to between now and 2031 when this website will still be standing. I could even sell merchandise from their storefront. Perhaps a DuPont t-shirt, if such a thing existed, would be cool. I don't know, imagine. And if you want to do the same and build your own website dedicated to Rob Ballacoon signing a 2-year extension with Ulster, please head to the link in the description and use the offer code SquidRugby to save yourself some money. Now, this is the start of the Autumn Internationals, and the Autumn International Series were pretty clear for us. Use footage whilst the competition is going on, and we risk legal action. So we sat down to instead go deep using stills and using other means to talk about England's kicking game, how Australia played it, and where the game was won and lost. We're going to continue to toy with some formats throughout this autumn, as it's really tricky and frustrating, but for the meantime, rugby. The 2025 Autumn International Series is underway. England have, in the end, quite comfortably beaten Australia in a game that didn't necessarily always feel comfortable.
Yeah, England just chipped away at Australia until it felt like they were the one team in the game by the end. And I think it's one of those, we'll get into this and some of the specifics of it, but Steve Borthwick, I think, got everything right in terms of his team selection and the tactics that he led on. It was quite, I don't want to say obvious, but heavily implied the tactics he was going to play in his team selection. And ultimately, the team that won the aerial contests on the day were the better team overall.
So we have no footage. We've not been granted footage rights they were very strict on this. They threatened legal action if we use any footage. Not even like Sanzar, who allows us to use 1 minute footage over the full video. Nothing at all. So it'll be stills, I'm afraid, and it'll be this format rather than anything else. I apologise. I know it's not what people want. It's not what we want to be doing ideally either, but situation we're in. But to follow up on what you said, right? I think Steve Borthwick got this right. Most games are won by some combination of the coach putting the right tactics in place and the players executing and the players being excellent. And look, obviously, England were very good, but I think this game skewed massively heavier to the coaches getting it right.
Yeah.
This was the perfect game plan put in place and the perfect selection for this game, and they allowed those players to go out there and do their natural game, right, and execute the way they do. And obviously, Alex Mitchell wasn't this natural box kicking player 5 years ago, but now he is. And part of that is Borthwick has gone, if you want to play for England, you need to be this. And now Mitchell is one of the best box kicking scrum halves in the world.
Yeah.
And George Ford obviously has a more complete game than just as a kicking fly half, but as a kicking fly half, he was excellent. And as a running fly half, we saw him play unbelievably flat. We saw him be very direct and really think about the game, you know? You look at the disallowed Ben Earl try, and it comes off a scrum, it's really smart. Ford just comes in incredibly flat. I think he might break the 5 metre line before the ball's out, but that's fine. Very few referees disallow this.
Especially when the scrum's wheeled in the way it has.
Yeah.
You know, that is clearly why he's doing this.
Yeah.
Because Jake Gordon sits into the boot of that scrum.
Exactly. So Gordon isn't there, he spots this, he goes in really hard, and he just runs straight. And he is like perfectly square. It's something George Ford's so good at, is almost like having a protractor out and measuring the angles on the pitch so he's perfectly in line. Almost so he's perfectly parallel to the touch lines. He's so square, then just gives a simple ball. And I rate as well Freddie Stewart also giving a simple ball and then just getting it out. You're changing the point of focus enough times that the Wallabies are watching for all these options. They know George Ford at any point can throw a missed pass. He's got 3 players outside him. Any of them could carry, including himself. Eventually, they go to ground, right? And before the tacklers even come in, watch George Ford here. You can't watch him. Look at the stills of George Ford here. He sees Sam Underhill is on his inside. He's the only player alongside. Instead of barking as you normally would and go, you carry, he goes, no, you work around here. And that allowed the players that are coming in behind to flood into this shape, right? What he wants is kind of an arrowhead behind him. He wants that free pod to be on either side of him and him to be kind of the focal point, him to almost be the head of the pod, right? So he has Underhill fold back onto his inside, meaning the two guys coming on with pace can both continue that momentum instead of need to fold and find position. Really smart, just means that Ben Earl is going at full speed when he arrives. Ford takes the ball himself and then just looks to, doesn't even engage the defender, just runs straight again, just like runs into the gap and waits for a defender to bite in. He then has Underhill on his inside as they go in there. Or, in this case, he doesn't even need to do the skip pass. He can just drop it off simply to Ben Earl, who goes over the try line. Obviously, it's an incredible tackle by Harry Potter, which holds him up.
Yeah. I love the way that he springs into life and becomes a part of that pod in the last second. That typically you'd see a 10 who would sit a little bit deeper, and George Ford obviously one of the 10s who would usually do this, and let them just run off him. And instead he clearly sees that gap opens up and really isolates. I'm going to go after one defender, get them tied in. Also ties in McWright on the inside as well, as you mentioned, with the inside runner there from Underhill. And as you say, like he times that perfectly to Ben Earl. It was interesting seeing him play this flat because it's been a long time since I've seen him really do that, but I think it really, really worked. And when we originally saw the team sheet come out, I think there were a lot of assumptions, including for myself, that George Ford was going to do a lot of the kicking on this. But actually, George Ford was trusted a bit more to just manage the attack, and Alex Mitchell took on a lot more of the kicking. As you say, he has become one of the best kicking nines in the world all of a sudden. And what I loved is so many of the selections paid off around this. Sam Underhill, I think, is one of the main ones in terms of not only the chop tackle that he brings, but he hit so many just like static rucks to just ruin the momentum for Australia, just try and blast the rucks. And even if he didn't come up with turnovers, it made it really sloppy for Australia to play off. And when they tried doing that zigzag attack that they try and do, where they will play open side, then blind side, then open side, then blind side, within sort of 20 metres of the touchline, they couldn't get that going. Because the likes of Underhill and Guy Pepper and Ben Earl were constantly just making havoc at the breakdown.
Yeah. Really nullified all of Australia's go-to kind of momentum getters.
Yes.
Right? England massively stopped the momentum. We've seen the Wallabies run a few patterns repeatedly to gain forward momentum, and they play off that, right? They love to try and play penalty advantage, and they also love to just try and get like 3 or 4 carries so the defence is on the back foot. And Bobby V had as good a game as ever at generating that, made one of the best carries I've ever seen, where he comes in at a completely static start. Like, this is obviously still photo, right? He was somehow even stiller in motion, and yet managed to still get over the gain line from there. I don't know how he does it, but otherwise, England wrapped them up, right? Joe Schmidt made quite a wise selection. He tried to bring his props in as extra carriers, Utalia Tupou and Angus Bell, as those primary carriers with the lack of Will Skelton, with this being outside the international window, so he wasn't released in time. And I see the vision, right? I get it, but there is this kind of issue that England were able to wrap them up, right? And you can much easier chop and get Angus Bell to ground quickly than you can Will Skelton. You can more easily roll Taniela Tupou as he catches the ball to the floor and get over the ball than you can Will Skelton. And by not even bringing in a champion de Cresney or someone to try and play that role instead, by focusing on, we'll get our props carrying, it became a bit of a tricky thing when England were able to just wipe them out.
Yeah.
Quite easily. Atoje, quite the excellent game. Sam Underhill, as you mentioned, really good.
Yeah.
Oh, and right, the thing I like about Sam Underhill, and it's something that doesn't come up much, but he is sort of old school in that he sort of does play as like link between forwards and backs, but also is massive in the kind of more modern 7 role, right? And like obviously came up under Justin Tipperick and has a little bit of that like, he's not a player anything naturally like Justin Tipperick, was clearly taught what a 7's job in the professional game is by Justin Tipperick.
Yeah.
So you see him turn up on people's like shoulders and attack, and you see him always floating around the scrum half and like getting involved and wrapping around and sniffing there. And I really enjoyed that about him, and I thought he was like, again, an inspired selection alongside.
Yeah, 100%. And the turnover that he got for the first 3-pointer of the game, where on kick return, George Ford sticks up a brilliant bomb for Freddie Stewart, and immediately they have Underhill following that up straight off the back of that. And again, I think there were a handful of moments where they very smartly chose to kick based around the personnel they had in their pack.
Yeah.
I really liked George Ford, first phase off a line-out, kicking back blind to where the line-out was, knowing all the forwards will be there. And Tom Roebuck running everyone on side. And suddenly, as soon as the ball's at the bottom of a ruck there, they have all of their best jackal resources in place, ready to pilfer the ball. And really smartly, they set up to carry. This looks like it doesn't carry, then suddenly George Ford turns back against himself and hangs it in the air. Yeah. And it catches everyone massively off guard. And then if you break it down kind of further, right, this was the first example in the game of something that became a real theme as it went on and led to 2 of England's tries, which is consistently England kicked to the last Wallaby in the backfield. Yeah. They landed it consistently on the last guy back. And generally, they kick much shallower. Generally, they kick so they can get someone up, they can get, Tom Roebuck or whoever else, up in the air, tap it back, brilliant, we win the ball back. Instead, time after time, they landed it on whoever the furthest back was, and almost exactly sat it on them, right? So they had to move like 3 or 4 meters to come onto the ball, which, look, as someone defending in the backfield, it's a nightmare.
you don't want the ball right on you. You kind of want to be running onto it 10 metres.
Yeah.
You don't want to be like struggling 20, 30 metres to get onto it. But like having the ball coming down on you, you have no chance to take a run up. You're just having to jump from a standing start.
Yeah.
Like you often find yourself having to do the thing where you've got to take backward steps to try and get back into position so you can come forward onto it. They often landed on Tane Edmed, who was often defending on one side with Kellaway on the other. They often ignore Kellaway's wing and land on Edmed's. And he wasn't doing that. He was just going up for static jumps. Whether they identify this as something he does when he defends the backfield, I don't know, or whether this is just like a natural side effect of this. But they were generally putting Roebuck, or sometimes they're over chasers, up against a static jumper who had no forward momentum.
Yeah.
And that was huge. And that allowed them to make such momentum. Actually, that Sam Underhill turnover you're talking about, right? That comes from them landing on Tane Edmed as the last defender back. And there was no one then behind him. And every kick, and we said this a number of times on the channel, gives you 3 chances to compete for the ball. Yeah. One is in the air, one to the breakdown following, and one is on the next phase defensively, right, when the team will be the weakest attacking-wise. And because there's no one behind Tane Edmed, right, it means that very perfectly, there's no one to clear out. There's no one around. So Kellaway has to work a really long way to get across. And all of the Australian forwards are late to get in position, the English ones, you say, who've been run on by Roebuck. And it means that they can get there first and blast onto the ball because they're coming in a straight line and through sheer physics, right? Australia got to come in, work around and come in the back. So they get over the top, they win that ball back. We see this time and time again, them landing it on the furthest away forward. Second half, we saw Australia adapt a little bit and often bring in someone else, either drop an player into the backfield, or very often have a player who is going backwards onto the ball a little bit, try and recover it themselves, rather than leaving the guy coming forward onto it, which is typically what you always want to be doing, take the ball, because it meant there's someone in the ruck, there's someone going in behind, or alternatively, if they spilled the ball, someone could get in there. We saw it a few times, right, where someone gets up in the air, they steal it back, and then it opens a chance, as we see for the try by Henry Pollock.
Yeah. The kick that Alex Mitchell puts on this is an absolute peach because it's actually more in the channel of Harry Potter, who's retreating, going backwards at this point, than it is necessarily Tane Edmed. But again, you want your backfield players to be moving onto the ball forwards. Rather than necessarily the closest player catching it, you want the player who can generate the most momentum, which in theory should be the one who's coming forwards onto the ball. And so it's such a good kick because if Potter does take it, he is probably taking the ball over his shoulder, he's got an exposed rib cage. Sam Underhill or Tom Roebuck or whoever can slide into the deck and get straight over the ball thereafter. Whereas Edmund wants to come onto the ball so at least he can engage contact on his own terms. And this is where Tom Roebuck really thrives. For me, I think he was probably the best player on the pitch. He was absolutely brilliant.
Up with Alex Mitchell.
Yeah,
Ben Earl, very good as well.
I suppose that was
Harry
it.
Potter on the day.
Yeah, indeed. Alex Mitchell, I suppose, set up Tom Roebuck for situations like this. What I love here as well is he lands this, and he's doing this all day, just on the inside of Tane Edmed, rather than the outside, which means that Tom Roebuck, because of the new blocking laws that you're not allowed to stop Roebuck from getting into this gap on the inside, he can just get his arm in the air and just put Edmed off, manage to slap it back, and Henry Pollock, lovely pick-up, rounds his man and manages to score the try in the end. Very similar to the try for Ben Earl as well. And again, landing that just on the inside for Roebuck to catch that, where he's got his support following up and flooding through.
This is a really interesting one because England, say, all day up until this point, have been kicking longer. They've been landing on the last play, and obviously this is an exit play, so it's slightly different. Australia are set up differently, and they will do something different. But this is about the shallowest that England kick all day.
Yeah.
They're generally going much longer than this. But here they land it about the length of where is contestable. Australia drops Suoli back into the backfield. An idea I understand, because he's excellent on the high ball, but this isn't his forte. What he's great at is winning those tapbacks, right? Rather than those claiming outrights. So it feels a little bit like they've looked at his stats and they've gone, oh, he's got 94 on kick regathering. They've gone brilliant to put him in the backfield. I'm thinking, actually, from a static start again, Mitchell's kick lands exactly on him. So he's got no chance to run onto it, which is how Suoli normally regathers his balls, is by running on and putting an arm in the air and regathering it. Instead, he's having to just like straight up catch it. He doesn't even jump for this, right? He just stood static trying to take it in. And Roebuck gets up and wins it perfectly.
Yeah. It's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because, as we said in the preview, kick battles in the air naturally favour the attack because they're moving forward onto the ball. And so they can engage on their terms 9 times out of 10. And so using Suoli in this position, I completely get it. Another really interesting use of him is here, Jake Gordon goes for a brilliant bomb on the blind side, and they put Joseph Suaalii onto the left wing and move him from the centre position. And this is great because he managed to put loads of pressure on the catch for Freddie Stewart here. Stewart, quite interestingly, dropped a few balls early days. England also adapted to that by slightly tightening up the backfield. There's this one where they put it on Stewart. He instead goes for the AFL catch over his head, and it deflects, goes straight into George Ford's hands because they've kind of got him there as that backstop type role. So I thought that was quite interesting that it looked like both teams were getting a lot of change out of the two aerial contests with each other. But in the end, England just chipped away and chipped away. And again, Roebuck has kind of claimed his jersey there in the England team. So I feel like this is just going to be who they are now. Is they're going to be a team who kick like this and they are hellish to defend.
And I think they will adapt based on the opposition.
Yeah.
I think Australia kicked... Individual kicks were great, but as a strategy overall, I think they got it wrong. They were kicking way too short. They didn't adapt to what England were doing tactically. So because England are kicking longer, right? Them landing it on that last player leads to situations like the Pollock try where there is no defender behind, right? And that will happen like 1 in 10 times where the ball will come loose, it falls for someone, and maybe they make a break. In this case, they happen to score off it, but fine, you know. That will happen 1 in 10 times. The other side of this, though, is you know that when you're going into saying, because it favours the attack, like 1 in 10 times you may be able to get over, you know, and challenge at the breakdown, or you may be able to get in, like make a huge shot in defence to face after, or you may win it back in the air a few times out of 10, especially if you've got someone as good as Tom Roebuck in the air. That boosts those chances up, right? If you land it on the last defender, then the chance of all of those are exponentially increased. If your winger is as good in the air and as fast as Tom Roebuck, the chance of you getting to that last defender are stronger. So England are then able to push Australia back like an extra 10, 15 metres each time. Australia then kicking shallower, partly I don't know if it's just because that's what they expect Jorgensen and Potter can get after, or maybe it's just a tactical decision, but they were consistently kicking maybe 20 metres, England kicking 35, 40, and landing it on a better defender to target to increase the odds of them winning it back or getting an advantageous position from there, even just putting the Wallabies in a really difficult place to attack from. So it was just like a complete like kicking tactical masterclass from Borthwick that led to Australia then doing nothing to counter it. And we saw a few times they kicked off 10, and I think generally a lot of their best kicking was Edmund stepping up, and I think Edmund had like quite a mixed game. There were moments in which you kind of looked at him and went like he's struggling with the pace of the game a little bit. There were moments which I thought he was really good. So a mixed occasion feels like someone that needs more time in that shirt to kind of...
I don't think he played badly, but I don't think he grabbed the game by the scruff in the way Alex Mitchell did.
And I think there are a few moments where you kind of saw things pass him by, or he wanted an extra second than he got, and things closed off for him. And that's quite tough when a young 10 kind of ends up in those situations.
Sure.
But like this clearance, right? Like, how good is that? Just banging it long, just getting it right off the field. And that's what Australia needs to be looking to do more, right? Is you've got someone with a massive boot on you. You know, in Harry Wilson.
Not just Harry Wilson.
And also Tane Edmund,
he didn't kick shallow, Harry Wilson.
No, but I also think maybe that's what they need to be looking to do, which is kick from those wings as well. And you use those wide channels because they were pulling them up really nicely. Like England, the lightest they've had the backfield was when it got out to the wings and they're bringing people in. So maybe they need to be using that more. Like I just thought Australia didn't adapt to the kicking game in front of them, where England were able to keep hammering them. And I do think there'll be an interesting test when they play, you know, New Zealand down the line, whether or not the All Blacks adapt to this. Because if New Zealand allow England to kick like this, England will win the game. Right? New Zealand need to have a smart enough counter-kicking game rather, in order to get around this and win this.
It's a shame we can't do too much justice to it with Sills, but I really like your shout about, you know, Potter putting a really good kick from the sideline when they dragged around the backfield. Jorgensen, likewise. Having two wingers who have really good kicking games like that. Kellaway as well when he goes back onto the wing.
Jorgensen's quietly got a massive boot.
Yeah, he does. And like when Tom Wright comes back into the fold as well, he'll be a really good option when it comes to that. Granted, Felipe Dungunu, not the most accurate kicker as we saw, but, you know, they've got so many options like that. It's something that Ireland used to do a lot when they had James Lowe and Mac Hansen on the wings, where they would get the ball to them and have them as extra fly halves and get them to kick when there's more space in the backfield because people are covering them as running threats. So I definitely think that's an option moving forward for Australia because, as you say, they didn't quite seem to get the kicking game just right when it wasn't Harry Wilson. Again, I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that Mitchell played such a blinder in terms of that, and they were always kicking on England's terms, and sometimes they were just hitting it back and kind of hoping for the best, and you know either kicking loosely when they were going long, or having to sacrifice a little bit of distance to try and get something that was something a bit closer to contestable, you know. Talking of Tom Roebuck, just another thing I want to touch upon is defensively just what he brings to this England team, because he is such a smart player in terms of knowing when he wants to go for that hard blitz. It's something that England got wrong quite a lot in the last autumn. Again, the moral of last autumn for England was we want to do this blitz defence. We just want to do it a little bit better. I think Roebuck is somebody who is so smart at decision making around that. You look here, Australia have made a break off the back of this, and Tom Roebuck doesn't panic, he doesn't sit off either. He just gets up into the passing channel of Tane Edmed. Edmed has to throw the ball over his head, which buys England just an extra second or two to scramble in that defence. It's a really unselfish play by Roebuck here, getting Edmed to sail that ball over his head to make it a hard pass for him. Edmed throws a brilliant ball, and Paisami does a brilliant run off the back of this and goes in on the outside, does a great step. It looks lovely, and it looks like he's about to score. But again, Roebuck manages to track all the way back across because he's bought himself enough time by making that ball go over his head. They managed to contain Australia for another 6 or 7 phases, and they win the ball back from a penalty turnover here. It's a brilliant defensive set, and in order to have good scramble defence, you need to buy yourself time or space to be able to do that. And again, Roebuck on that wing has done that brilliantly here.
Yeah, I thought Roebuck excellent. This England pack, brilliant. I just think they're building into a really serious team, and I think it's worth breaking down maybe after this autumn the way in which they are building towards this World Cup, because I think they're becoming contenders week on week and stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's a slowly building project, but this felt like a real statement of we're up and running, same way Argentina did. And look, the highlight of the England year, I think, if you just look at it on paper, is winning by 60 in Cardiff, right? But I think actually this performance and the performances against Argentina were more pleasing and were more important in terms of the way they went. We can change team, we can change and pick pieces based on what we think the opposition's weaknesses are, and we can assemble a game plan and assemble a project that kind of can go into action. All these players can execute their roles, and we will win comfortably. We will win by, in the end, 20-ish points.
Yeah. They have very strong potential to become the best team in the world at contestable kicks and regathering.
If they're not already.
And it is an incredibly taxing game plan to play against because you're constantly on the retreat and figuring out how do we get back on top. So it's very tiring. And then you bring in the English bench, who all came on and were brilliant. And when the game then opens up later on, it will force the opposition to make more risky plays and make errors and all sorts, at which point you can feed the likes of Pollock, who was brilliant off the bench for England. You can feed the likes of Ellis Genge and Luke Cowan-Dickey, who came on, who were experienced, brilliant carriers, that this feels like this should have been England's game plan all along.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to see where it's going to go from here, because I have a feeling this is just going to be the team they are from now on.
Yeah. Eddie Jones once said he wanted to create the most English England team of all time. I think Steve Borthwick is currently doing that.